Well, thank you very much, Bridget. And we're so thankful at the Blockchain Research Institute. IBM is a founding member and is the presenting sponsor, one of the two presenting sponsors for this event. And personally, I thought that was worth the price of admission right there. Thank you. Closing session for today. It's a great delight, and I really mean that, to introduce Imogen Heap, longtime friend, well, last few years, friend and collaborator of ours around blockchain and things related to the intersection of blockchain and music and other things. I've got some notes here because I want to make sure I get that right. Two-time Grammy-awarded producer, writer, singer, multi-instrumentalist, and technologist. Imogen is also the creative force behind Gestureware, the Gestureware Mimu gloves, and the music ecosystem Mycelia, which we'll be talking about. Imogen recently won the Grammy for her work with Taylor Swift and is the composer and arranger for the acclaimed West End musical Harry Potter and the Cursed Child. So please welcome Imogen Heap.
Hello. Hey, how's it going? Hello.
Welcome to Toronto and Blockchain Week.
Yay, Blockchain Week.
It's great to have you here. So the first time we actually met, I don't know if you remember, but you invited me to your son Scout's first year birthday party.
She may have looked like a boy, but she was actually a girl.
Oh yeah, that's right, sorry. My mistake. And it was quite the affair, the Roundhouse. It's an hour outside of London. And I actually went back to recall what was there. There was a sound-reactive LED tree, a bouncy castle, and a buffet that was fit for Henry VIII. And the crowd was kind of electric. So I remember a contact juggler, 24 toddlers, their parents, neighbors, musicians, and a handful of blockchain developers, your typical crowd. And at it, you talked about rebuilding the music industry, and you thought that maybe Scout would benefit if she became a musician, followed in her mom's footsteps. And it was an amazing thing. So what's wrong with the music industry, and why do you want to change it?
Well, it needs a lot of help. It's been marred with 100 years of big industry struggling to adopt new technologies. It comes from a time where 100 years ago you'd have recorded music being played on the radio, and there were people who had clipboards, and they would write down the songs on the radio station, and they would take the money from the radio station and they would give it to the publishers, and the publishers may or may not have given some money to the songwriters. And so that's where the industry really began, about paying royalties to the publishers and to the music makers. And really, it hasn't really changed that much in terms of these big organizations trying to capture the money that we're due and then to distribute it. Since digital transformation in music and MP3, it's become increasingly harder to do that effectively, whereby the amounts that, for instance, a stream might generate for somebody who's, just your average jobbing musician, you're not like your Taylor Swifts or your Adeles, the amount that they're going to be getting in their pocket is so tiny compared to the amount of effort and time it takes for the industry to distribute that money that they often don't. They can't afford it, and most of the time, the money that they can't pay out, the money that they don't match to the music maker, gets put back into their organization. If they can't match monies after, say, 3 or 4 or 5 years, then they just keep it. So there's no incentive to solve that part, which is why 4 years ago, I got very excited about blockchain, about this idea that we could share a data set, that we could see this together, a transparency, and that we could somehow help this very big problem in that sometimes there's 20 different societies, 20 different organizations with 20 different databases just to make a payment from a radio station into the hands or the pockets of a music maker.
And so this is a chronic problem, and it's a problem for the composers and the creators, and would you say in some ways for the musicians too? I mean, the industry could only bet on home run hitters because only one of 20 would ever be successful. So if you're a klezmer band or something in Vancouver, you're never going to get a label to sign you. You're a good bunter or a singles hitter.
Yeah, I mean, that has always been the case. There's only been so much airspace. Even in just radio, we had a smaller amount of bands vying for those spots, and now we have millions of music makers all around the world vying for those spots where we have digital distribution and, you know, reaching the masses via YouTube, where you can yourself make a piece of music and have it online in, you know, half a second out there to reach millions. The innovation has happened in the, you know, those at the source of the risk, taking on the risk, and then distributing that out, and that happening and reaching the masses in the space of minutes. The same innovation hasn't happened about how that money finds its way back to the music maker. It's a very slow process.
Has the internet the Internet of Information, first era of the internet, has it made it better or has it made it worse?
It's just very largely completely changed the landscape. It means that it's democratized it in a huge way. Anyone can make music, can make films, can you know, write, can be a blogger. There's all this opportunity, but whereby people are listening to that music and enjoying that music, or using that music in some way, it's a very long, slow process, if at all, that it ever reaches the right pockets. As an example, the music industry, I think, is worth, this is a Berkeley music paper research that they released four years ago. $45 billion industry, only between 20 to 50% of those royalties meet their intended parties. So that's a lot of money that's just going back into an industry which really needs to be developing new technologies to find that 50% that they can't reach. So again, the perfect opportunity as the world looks into new ways to solve these problems across the value chain. Suddenly the music makers' woes have become other people's interest because it's area for improvement and potential money to be made, commercial opportunity, whereby there was no way in. So, you know, 5 years ago, talking about the problems of the music industry, would be like, oh, shut up. You know, we've heard it all before. Whereas now it's like, oh, perhaps we could build something for that. Perhaps we could, you know, perhaps there's something here that we've done for Maersk shipping that can help you in identifying, you know, this value chain, and looking at all kinds of, you know, other industries for help, really, because the music industry can't deal with it internally. It does have the money, but it doesn't want to develop the solutions. So it's coming from outside, and it means that, you know, Bridget was just up here talking about IBM blockchain, and we've been reached out to by IBM blockchain and now starting to do a pilot with them. And it's just an incredible feeling to have such a hugely world-renowned tech company, you know, very much respected, got a great track history, being interested in the music industry and really wanting to help. And that kind of kudos that it's given the work that we're doing is immense, because previously the music industry was like, nah, blockchain, just like they were when MP3, MP3, what's it ever going to do? And then it just blew everything out of the water. And really, if they'd adopted the technology back when they could have done, you know, around the time of Napster, we would be 10 years ahead of where we are now.
So back when we first started talking, we were, for the book, Blockchain Revolution, I remember that the Canadian Songwriters Association had done some research. And I think I might have mentioned this earlier, but if you'd written a platinum song, 1 million singles, 35 years ago, you get $46,000 in revenue. And today, 1 million streams will get you $35. So the Internet of Information kind of, in some ways, was part of the problem because it killed it was a publishing platform. There was no platform for the creation of value. So you're in the process of creating and launching Mycelia. We'll get into your new stuff in a sec. But what's the big vision there? What does a music industry based on an internet of value actually look like? And how could that be in the interest of the creators of content, but also maybe for the lovers of music and other players as well?
Yeah. I think for 4 years, well, at least for the first year, I was like, bam, big vision. Everybody needs to put data into one database around songs, and everybody's going to exchange. It's all going to be wonderful. The music industry were like, yeah, that's not really going to be working out for me in my black box space over here.
Right.
So that didn't get a lot of traction. But actually, I realize now that it's not what we want, actually. What we want is augmentation. What we want is to try to ease the flow of what is already there. There's a lot of good people, a lot of good services that are out there, that by way of the music industry, the kind of record labels being the only real financiers in the music ecosystem, because no investor, outside of a record label would invest with you in a million years, because they can't see the value chain, they can't see when your money is due. You should see the ridiculous, statements that we get. They're unsearchable, they're PDFs, they don't have any information, but they have all information. So if we can open this up, if we can say, here is a song, here's who owns this song, here's who played on this song, here's the kind of equipment that was used on this song, here's where it was written in the world, here's what it's actually about, here's what I was wearing, here's what I was thinking. This is the charity that it's about. All of this information, if this was all available, we could have so much innovation around the new data that we're currently missing. The innovation previously has all happened around what the labels have, and that's copyright. So they have a song, and they have the rights for that song, and sometimes they have 100%, sometimes they have 50%. Most of the time it's around 85% of all the income goes to the label. And maybe, arguably, you could decide, well, maybe that's fair enough, because the manufacturing of previous records and the shipping and all that stuff would have cost money, whereas now that's a very different space. It's like, bam, on there, doesn't cost a cent to put it up there. So if there's clarity in the value chain, it means that anybody can invest. It means that you can invest in my next song, somebody else could, my mum could. I could invest in another artist, because I know when they get paid, I can see what they've currently, what's in the chain. I can see, they've done this many plays on this Spotify, and I can make a projection, whereas at the moment there's nowhere to look at that information. So if we had a song, that the song itself was generating a smart contract of payment to all the interested parties, public and private, in that data, then lots of people could invest. You can invite your fans to micro-invest in your next record, and then the labels become not the only gatekeepers to the money, which means they can relax a little bit. They can get on with, doing label services. They can get on with marketing, they can get on with some design, they can get on with some, development of the artist, instead of always worrying about how they're going to pay all this money back. So I think we'll start to see in the big labels, as is maybe the future of companies in general, we start to see people not working for companies so much, but more the individual and the small businesses. And that's the reality of, most music makers now are not signing those major deals. They're self-releasing artists, and they have their own rights, but there is no way to make this work yet in the current space, because we aren't able to be identified as individuals to be done business with. That becomes the problem, is that we don't have an identity space to interface with the millions of music makers around the planet, which is the latest thing that we're doing.
Okay, we'll get to that in a sec. So that's such a powerful idea. I think once you described it as my song becomes a business, sort of it's inside this contract, and the contract is protecting my intellectual property rights, and the contract has all these capabilities, like to pay me, sort of a contract with a software lawyer and a bank and I don't know what else, government inside the contract. So I want to do something with your song. I want to put it in my movie. How would that work?
Well, first of all, how do they know that your song exists? If you want to put a song into a movie, you're most likely going to be, you've either heard it before, which means it's already got attention, it's already reached above the level of, oh, there's a little peak, a little beacon of light for that song, which often involves a lot of money to discover that song, to market that song, to reach above the noise. Unless you're an outlier YouTube hit, then you might, get a hit that way. So it comes in combination with what AI can do for discoverability of music that's already out there. And it also comes into, you have to think about how that song is going to be, how is it going to express itself? What is it? What kind of song is it? What kind of key is it in? What kind of tempo? What kind of structure does it have? That they might also be things that, a future music supervisor for a film might be looking at. And instead of, I want to use a song, how do I license that? Currently, that's a very irritating process. You might find a song you like, and then you have to somehow magically figure out who represents that song, and then you have to contact them, and then the publishers will then have to contact the writers and then also the musicians. And there can be 20 people they have to have permission with, and that could take 6 months. So that then it disappears, and then they go with the people that they always go with, which is why we hear the same people a lot in film and TV,
Right.
which I benefited from previously. But if we could open that up and go, imagine that you had access to ability to discover all kinds of new music, and you might be able to single out, I want to find songs that were written in Ethiopia with these kinds of instruments. Doesn't matter that, these musicians at the moment, we don't know they're there. There's no organization representing them. There's no collection society. There's no publishers. How do we reach them? So again, it comes back to the person. It comes back to the creative themselves. In combination with blockchain-based technologies, in combination with AI and discoverability, but we need to show ourselves as the individual to then open up new possibilities for work and discoverability, and at that point, be able to verify that you are part of a song, part of an existing network under your own steam.
Yeah. So this is a real shift for you, from the song to the creator.
Yeah.
So tell us about it. I mean, what is the initiative?
Well, initially it was all about the song. It was, let's put loads more information into a song, and let's help it be discovered, and let's help that song to do business with the world. But then it was, well, how are you going to author into that song? How are people going to find that song? How are people going to find your name and link to that song, and that you would know about it? So the beginning point is the person. The person generates the content, and then the content goes and finds new homes. So it was really it came from the frustration, I suppose, in the early stages, like a few years ago, trying to get the industry to come to a consensus around utilizing this technology for good. And we're kind of falling on deaf ears a bit. And then we thought, well, what can we do now? Like, what can we actually do? As a non-profit, we're not taking VC funding for this. We thought, if we can create an identity space where I can put my songs, I can put all the industry partners that I currently work with to showcase, the good actors that I work with. I could also showcase my skills, my passions, my past projects, my website. Then I could do things like, imagine if I just could simply update my biography across all of the different DSPs, so like Spotify, iTunes, Pandora, all the other places that currently make up a biography for me. And sometimes they pay a company to do that, but where do they get that information? They get it maybe from scraped stuff or Wikipedia, but a lot of musicians don't have a Wikipedia. A lot of musicians don't have that biographical content out there, and it's always out of date. So instead of paying a company out there to do that, why not pay me directly a small bit of money, a fraction of a cent perhaps, for use of this biography, and then you can put it up into your service, and you can have it whenever somebody wants to access it, and I could dynamically change that whenever I've got a new thing to mention. I could be mentioning now, currently speaking at Blockchain Revolution Global. If somebody clicks onto Spotify, they could see, oh right, I'm in Toronto. Oh my goodness. But there's no way to do that to make it relevant right now. So by way of centralizing to the person, but decentralizing the opportunities, then somebody like Spotify could see the value in that. So we started to develop what we call the Creative Passport, which is a point for your music services. It's a business-to-business solution. It's not fan-facing, though fans could look at it. They could see your skills, but it's not my artist website. That's something else. It's something that my Creative Passport might feed. Here is my songs, here are my videos, all hosted around different places. But here is an opportunity for you as a fan to host my material for some, payment of doing that. It just really opens things up the minute you have a home to build from. So that's what the Creative Passport is around. So we have a very simple onboard at the moment. It's a little app that you can sign up your name, and you put your whereabouts, and then you can now go and peer-to-peer verify your other music maker friends to be ourselves a trust anchor for the music industry, to be ourselves a verified point to trust. Okay, Imogen Heap is a PRS member. She can now sign into Spotify using her Creative Passport. And we can then reach into places where there is currently no way to reach, like musicians in Ethiopia or musicians in, Brazil or wherever they are in the world, where maybe they don't have the same opportunities that we do in the United Kingdom or Canada or the US, and actually probably where it's easier to build something like this because there's no incumbents perhaps that might feel threatened by it in any way. I think the biggest obstacle, to be honest, has been that many people feel we are, trying to do people out of jobs in the industry, because really what we want to do is to augment the current space. It's not to disrupt it in a negative way. I think where there is good, then we want to magnify that, and where there is trouble and extra cost because of these multiple databases, let's just stop thinking about that. Let's stop thinking about personal data as somebody else's profit. And I think once we get past that, we can deal with the creative solutions and the creative services that can come from sharing this data space.
So this is not just like an old school skills inventory or something like that. Describe how it's got assets in it. It can do transactions. It's authenticated. You control it.
Yeah. Well, I'm talking as if maybe it's hard to know whether I'm talking as if it actually exists or it doesn't exist. At the moment, it's really about a groundswell of going city to city. So we've just done 14 weeks in Europe, 14 countries in Europe, and we do workshops. So we do design sprints and hack weekends, and we speak to music makers and services and blockchain experts and AI, and just throw it all in the mix and we try to figure out what really this is. And actually what it is very small, it's very thin. It's just your personal data around your creative works and your creative self. Some things that you would usually type in twice, be like, oh, I've already typed that in somewhere else. That's the stuff that we're talking about. And then beyond that, it's the services, the discoverability, project management over here, design, front cover over here, managers over there, whatever it might be, sync agency, speaker people. It would be, all of these services would sit on top of that layer of skill sets, but then also trying to tidy up the lost data or the missing data in the 50% of those songs that aren't reaching the right people. And it's kind of working in formation, I suppose. It's we felt like this was a bit that nobody was talking about. People were innovating for the music industry, but thinking in terms of the music industry is record label, publisher, collection society, and nobody's thinking music makers. Where are they? How do they interface with this? It should be that we do that independently. So that's been the main shift, I suppose. And with that, we're now working with, doing pilots with IBM and MIT and Berkeley Music, and over in the UK, even Universal Music Group are starting to be interested. So, the biggest major now going, maybe this is interesting to us because it's going to help our music be more discoverable. If we can encourage the music maker to augment existing song data to magnify its chances of discoverability because it has information about where that song was written or what guitar was used or, who previously owned that trumpet or whatever level of detail you might get to, it means increased opportunity for the songs that they represent. So
That's interesting because you might have thought they'd be threatened by it. I mean, it is the crack in the door where the light can come in, to
Yeah.
quote Leonard Cohen.
That's true.
I mean, where it starts to change the axis of control in the industry more towards the music makers, away from the suits.
Yeah, I think really, what digital has done, it equals trillions of lines of data, every day, more than the industry had to deal with before in terms of amount of songs. I think it's like 50,000 songs get put up every day, or more than that, I don't know. And 90% of the songwriters of those are self-published, so they're not going through the big
Machinery, yeah.
and there's no, how do we interface with that? And that's the future. The record label, the major labels have this legacy work, but they also need to remain relevant. Otherwise, music makers aren't going to want to sign up with them, because the more open social media becomes, the more we can talk about these things. Yeah. So they're now looking to innovate into more external label services, rather than keep it all within sign person, do everything for person, and give them a small bit of money and take a huge cut. Now they're doing external services where, if you're not signed, they might help you put stuff online and see data about that. So they see the shift in the industry, and they see that it's not cool to sign to a major anymore. That most people only do it as a last resort.
Some of the research we did, someone had this great comment that 90% of the music in the world will be created in the next 10 years.
Yeah.
And so sure, you have this legacy, and God may have created the world in 6 days, but he didn't have an installed base to deal with, and that's there. But clearly there's this explosion of creativity, and if we can have a new platform for making that available, and for the makers of the music to be fairly compensated, that would be extraordinary.
Yeah. I think what's become realized is that rather than it be about one big thing that is there and has all the data in there, it's about linking the existing databases and adding to and creating networks, and across different blockchains. So I think with that, perhaps there needs to be thought about, and they already are thinking about, how to help those industry partners who have spent millions of pounds on their databases, how to incentivize them to add into this space. And it could be around, if you generate content which is verified and correct and in place, and you're adding a truth to this space, then you should be recompensed for that. So if and when a piece of data about a song is accessed by a service or by a sync agency, then they would receive a small clip of that. And the same for music makers. If I generate content that is being used widely, or tiny bit, that I also should be recompensed for that data, adding that data. It could be about where a song was written, that might be used by a holiday company, that might be like, okay, let's decide where you want to next go on your holiday depending on your iTunes playlist. Your number one is actually written in Bhutan. Perhaps you'd like to go there. And then you might discover 10 other songs that have written around that, and that could be your next holiday, kind of musically inspired holiday. So for that data, perhaps the holiday company wants to pay a little piece of money to the people who generated the content around that thing that sold their holiday. So there's loads of opportunities just outside of streaming, and I don't know if I mentioned it, but I think about 90% of my income doesn't come from streaming. Yet all of the innovation in the last kind of 10 years for the music industry has been around streaming, has been around how to make people pay for music. Right. But the tiny amounts that it goes in relative to the other income could be giving lessons, or doing live shows, or money from sync agencies, or getting a brand collaboration. That's a lot more that comes in for me. And the reason it comes in for me is because people know that that's what I do. They know, oh, she likes blockchain, she likes gestural music, she's into technology. So Intel comes and gives me a job, Sennheiser gives me a job, Dolby gives me a job. But if that's because I've been in the press, and again, it's another opportunity, if the individual can share what they've done, what they are capable of, their skill sets, then Dolby or Intel or Sennheiser could find some other artist who might be willing to do a song for a lot less, that they might be happy to, to help collaborate with because it helps them get a platform. Maybe they have a percent of the song. But at the moment, they can't be discovered because there's no way to find them.
What do you think about that? I mean, the idea that the song is just a billboard for ancillary rights, that all the money comes from shows and from all the other stuff. Is that the future, or is there a model here whereby the creators of the composers of the music actually start to get a bigger piece of the revenue, the total revenue picture?
I think currently the way it stands with the big companies like the Apples and the Spotifys of the world, the rates are set, and they're not really going to massively change. I think what might change is if another YouTube, a blockchain-based, decentralized YouTube turns up, which does actually pay the creators, significantly more than they do on YouTube, then the public would also go there, and that would also benefit the music makers, because it's not just the music makers who are getting, who are not benefiting from the huge amount of views. It's also anyone releasing a cat video. YouTube's also benefiting from that. So again, it comes down to if we can create a new playground of songs over here with the data and the music makers over here, we can create this new opportunity for thousands of services. So we don't just have 3 or 4 big major music services. We have 10,000. We have small communities. We have, curated spaces where communities can come around and gather and talk about, that weird branch of bluegrass or whatever they want to do. That starts to emerge. And with it, how the people passport or every person's identity is how is that viewed online? Because I'm sure you have an Instagram. I know you have an Instagram, Twitter, this and that, this. But where are you? Where are you in this digital space? You're like this, kind of being torn apart, and we all are. And I think until we have that point at which we kind of interface with the world on our terms, and we decide what we want to see, and we decide how much people use our data or not, and whether we want to see that data or whether we're just happy to sell it, then that's where we start to see a real change in everything. Somebody was just talking to me about the people-centered internet around Vince Cerf's ideas around that, and this is a kind of small bit like that. It's if it's people-centered music industry, individual grounding from us, then we can build all kinds of beautiful things from that.
Hear, hear. It's such a profound idea, that we, the virtual us, is all this data, and we're kind of all over the place. That never really occurred to me. I'm everywhere. But imagine a world where there's the virtual me is kind of like me. And I actually control it, and I own it. Yeah. And all this data that I create, I get to keep and use to plan my life. I might even want to monetize it. Who knows? I might even want to protect my privacy. Crazy idea.
I know, crazy.
You're wearing a glove. Come on, the winter's over in Toronto. What is that thing anyway?
Yes, I'm wearing this. This is my backup pair. I have I'm going to be doing a little thing tonight at your gala. And this is a piece of technology that I've been developing with, there's 9 of us on the team. They're called the Memu Gloves, and I think you've seen me perform with them. Did you? Did I perform with them? Oh, I didn't perform. Well, anyway, you'll see me tonight. This is, in a way, it's like, it kind of relates to what we're doing with the Creative Passport, in that we want to create that clean line between the creative and and that how do we reach people? Where is that point to stem from? And for me, when I was doing lots of touring previous to the gloves, I would have like a barrage of gear. I would have like samplers and laptops and this and computers and tons of gear. It would cost me so much just in freighting and ridiculous, annoying carnets that we have to make for every country to go through. And I just thought there must be a simpler way to just sample my voice. Why do I have to have like 10 boxes to do a thing? And then I just, realized that the technology had become available to be able to make these simple actions like sample my voice, move a sound left to right or in 360 as I'm now doing on the tour, different postures to access different sounds, to be able to create that spontaneity, that kind of unhinged, free space on the stage. So I'm wireless now, I don't have tons of wires attached to me, and I can go around and sample my voice, have reverb attached, I can move the sound around. So yeah, tonight I'm going to demonstrate these. But it's like trying to simplify the process. Essentially, I want to make a piece of music, and I want to access the technology inside my laptop in order to do that. And I want to do that as quickly as possible. So it's a kind of physical manifestation of the ideas around what we want to do with the Creative Passport. And today, actually, these little babies are being launched into the world after 8 years. So we can finally, other people can have them, finally, after so long.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, well, that's exciting.
Today's the day.
Just one more thing. So, for better or for worse, from your perspective, you've sort of been thrust into the center of this whole transformation of the music industry, and more broadly, you become this not just a spokesman, but a practitioner for a whole new model of identity and how the world could work and how citizens could be treated fairly and people could be compensated for the value they create. I'm sure that wasn't a plan.
No.
How did that happen anyway?
My dear friend Zoe Keating, she's an incredible musician and mind and mother, a great inspiration to me. And she, as I was almost just at wit's end, trying to write a song with a newborn baby who's 3 months, trying to constantly want to feed off me, which is fine because that's fair enough. But I needed to write this song for Sennheiser, and they were paying me a lot of money, and there wasn't any other money at the time. So I had to rent a breast pump. And the breast pump created the rhythm for this song called Tiny Human, which was the song that I walked onto stage, my walk-on music, which was the first song in the world to distribute payments for the musicians using a smart contract. And that was 4 years ago. So that was really the beginning. And my dear friend who introduced me to the concept of blockchain, she was just about to head off to a blockchain summit.
This is Zoe?
As a musician, as a musician, and did a bit of research into what this all was, and found some good articles online that she shared with me, because I was lamenting about what am I going to do when this song's done. It's going to be this painful process of trying to release something and get people to discover it, and then make sure all of the different industry partners that are involved in that have the correct data, and it's really hard to publish the data across all the different sites. And she said, do you know what, I think there's something in blockchain. I think you should look into it. There's something about everybody sharing the same data set, being able to see, who's written what, or it could be applied to that. And I just lost my mind in excitement and stayed awake for 7 or 8 days trying to, didn't have any problem with that because I had a baby, but researching as much as I could. And then George Howard, this guy is writing for Forbes, who's part of the Berkeley Rethink paper about music industry. He said, Zoe, do you know anyone who's innovating in the blockchain and music space? And she said, oh yes, Imogen. And I hadn't done anything at all. I hadn't even done anything at all yet. But he said, oh, I'd like to interview you. So he interviewed me. It took a very long time, and I spent about a week really thinking about what it was that I wanted in the music industry. And that article crystallized these kind of excitements around the future of the music industry. And it was in a Forbes piece. And then after that, literally overnight, I just had thousands of emails into my website. Just, oh, I want this. Where can I sign up? I want my Mycelia. Blah. And it wasn't a thing, It was just an idea. And in many ways, it's still just an idea. But it's becoming more real as we find other people doing similar things and come together. So I found myself here by accident, but I was really inspired. And I've just met some incredible people, and actually Vinay Gupta, who's in the audience.
Yeah. Who was
really
at the party, too, as I remember.
What's that?
He was at the party.
Of course, he's always at the party. He's at every party. He really inspired me to just carry on. He was the one who introduced to me the concept of what a smart contract could do. And I was just beyond excited, and I just couldn't stop myself, much to the annoyance of my boyfriend and every single friend around me at the time. So through the help of people taking this idea seriously when the music industry wasn't, I've just carried on.
And you're about to start a North American tour.
That's right. Yeah, we start in Miami on the 29th, I think, or 30th of this month, April. And then we're coming back to Toronto on the 16th and 17th at the Queen Elizabeth Theatre.
I'm sure there'll be many people here, there. So.
We will have gloves. So we're doing 10 cities, 14 shows, and we do music workshops, music maker, creative passport workshops everywhere we go. So I've met quite a few and re-met a few people in the audience today that I've met over the last 4 years. And we hope that people will come to these workshops and share their knowledge and build and create and develop, because we're going to be very soon, in the next year, we're going to be ready to share APIs and start developing services, building out services from the Creative Passport.
Well, I know it was a disruption for you to come here because you're rehearsing for the tour, so thank you very much.
Yeah.
And one issue, though, is your people have not called my people about me being in the band. And
Oh dear.
I have skills.
Yes,
No,
I know.
seriously.
I know.
I'll
Well,
be in the audience
just
on this
you
one.
bring a guitar and play along to my glove song.
Imogen, congratulations. And on behalf of everybody, thank you so much.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you. Thanks, Tom.
Came crashing in